All right. Okay, so this is game number three. I think, yeah, game number three with Jordan. I have the white pieces, and I'm going to make an E4 opening. I am looking at this moment in time. I'm looking, and I've got my fingers crossed for a Ruy Lopez type game. I have done a little bit of studying recently on the Ruy Lopez, so I've got my notes in front of me on the Ruy Lopez just in case I get one of those games. And Jordan responded. I made a normal move. Jordan responded to the normal move, and this is why I'm looking for a Ruy Lopez. Again, these are principled opening moves, and the bishop can go to any number of places. But I park it here all the way to b5, which gives us the Ruy Lopez opening, and I'm very excited about that because I was hoping to get a game in. Now, my notes say that the next most likely move for response for black is to either push this pawn and directly attack the bishop, which could lead us into a closed game or an exchange game, or this knight can move to this square, which is the Berlin defense. I don't know which way Jordan's going to go, but I've got my notes ready for both just in case. He goes with the Berlin defense. Now, my notes say that, first off, yes, this is a perfectly principled move. It moves his knight with tempo because it's attacking my undefended pawn. So I need to either defend this pawn or figure something out. But when I look at my notes, the Berlin defense says that it's okay to go ahead and castle early, leaving this as an undefended pawn. So even though the last time I played a game and I didn't listen to my instincts or I didn't follow my notes, went horrible. So this time I am going to follow what the notes say. The notes say, go ahead and castle, leave this undefended. Jordan capitalizes on that. Now, at this moment in time, he did ping me in the chat. We're chatting as the game's going on. But he did ping me and say that he'd like to bookmark the game here on turn 4. And I believe it has to do with this. Like, he's probably asking himself, is this correct to capture? Well, according to my notes in the Ruy Lopez and the Berlin defense, this is fine to capture here. There are other moves that are also acceptable, but this one is fine. Now, the challenge is white makes this next move, and this is why it gives up that pawn, is because it gets its rook. White gets its rook out in line with black's undeveloped king or uncastled king, and it attacks two things simultaneously. So this principled move here is, I think, one of the key points of why white is happy and content playing the Berlin defense. Notice this is the most important thing for black at this moment in time is to move this knight out of the way. It can go a couple of places, right? It can go there, it can go there, it can go here. It probably won't go there, even though there's a possible trade gonna happen. Because if we park the knight, if black parks his knight there, yes, it is defended, but a simple move by white will then open up an additional attacker on it, and so it could potentially cause some concerns. Those are lines that are way above my understanding. So Jordan is most likely going to move back in one of these two squares. And picking this square, I think, was a perfect square to pick because it defends, right? So it gets his knight out of the way and attacks at the same time. So this is a fantastic move. I would love to get this pawn and say that I've won a free pawn out of all this development, but I'm not about to give up my bishop in the process. So there are a couple of moves that this bishop can make at this moment in time. It can move back here, which is part of a line that basically walks this bishop all the way back and kind of hides it away somewhere, or it parks it here and gets it on this long diagonal, or it can continue with this exchange. And the notes that I wrote down said, take the exchange. It undefends this pawn. So my opponent is now, I am attacking that pawn twice, and my opponent is not able to defend that pawn in any way. Even with something like this, it won't defend that pawn. So yes, I'm giving up a bishop. For me, personally, I'm happy to get the knight off the board, just because I don't like knights. I struggle with seeing the knight forks. So this move, in my opinion, is a win for me, and I am, at this point in the game, I am happy with it. I make the exchange. Now I've got a pawn out here that I can I can happily take, and which I do. Now, at this moment in time, Jordan and I, again, we're texting each other back and forth, and I mentioned to him, I said, hey, be aware of this. He said that he had already noticed it, and he's just deciding exactly where and how he wants to take care of this. But notice, and all of you guys who are watching this video, notice, the only thing standing between my opponent's king and my rook is my piece, something that Jordan cannot control. So Jordan's king is being x-rayed. Do I have any really cool discoveries with this? Yeah, I got a few I could probably come up with. This one here jumps to mind. Notice that if I jump my knight here, Jordan is in check. He has to somehow get out of check, either by moving a queen or a bishop, and either way, from this square, my knight is eyeballing both those squares. So no matter what, this could be a very dangerous situation for Jordan's queen. He mentioned me back. He texted me back. He said back on turn 5 when this E1 move happened, he said it turns out that that's a lot more potent, not just a threat to the king, but also causing trouble everywhere. Or not just a threat to the knight, excuse me, but causing trouble everywhere. So White's response to the Berlin defense seems to be this really strong rook. So Jordan makes a perfectly principled move. He gets his bishop in here, cuts off my king, and handles the risk of that discovered check just fine. At this point in time, I start getting some development out. So from here, like, this is a fine position, I think, for both pieces. Black has a little bit more development, right? He's got 2 pieces up and out. Black does have an extra pawn. No, black doesn't. Pawns are even, excuse me. Black has a little bit more development, but White's lack of development is made up for, I think, by the fact that the king is tucked away and protected. So I am out of my notes. So I no longer have notes for how to proceed with this particular game. And you notice that we've run into a minority of games ever since. So at this point in time, probably the most likely move is the database says the most likely move is to go ahead and prop this knight up. This might come back to bite me in the butt when I make these other moves and I don't prop this knight up. So it is something that for me personally, I'm going to have to learn and reevaluate and figure out, would it have been better to go ahead and prop this up? Because notice that making this pawn move also opens up my bishop to get my bishop out. Black castles. I make a pawn move that probably should have been all the way up to here. Again, the exact same reason. So I make this pawn move, but I don't defend my knight in the process. So this is probably where the first bit. Let's look what the engine says. Yeah, see, up until this point, the engine says white is up a little bit, right? Yeah, so here, white is up just a little bit. Not a lot. One pawn up, right? 1 point up is not a tremendous advantage one way or the other. But notice that that advantage has disappeared by making this move. Whereas if I had made that move, that advantage would at least stick around a little bit. So something to look at for me for the future is to go ahead and I've done all of this work to move my knight all the way up here. Knights in front of my opponent's king are a threat. I could easily just park this guy here. I could probably even move my king over into the corner and use my F pawn, which is the forget about it pawn. I could probably even use that to continue to reinforce this knight and make this a great outpost, meaning my knight on your side of the board, threatening all kinds of crazy things should pieces start to move around, and you would have to sacrifice some material to get rid of it. So that's probably on me to learn that better. Jordan immediately just goes to attack it. Why not, right? Like, here's an exposed piece that's defended once, start attacking it. I also start defending it. Here's an attack here, this is a good move. I made a comment at some point in time about back here. Yeah, here. Actually, yeah, right here. Perfect timing, Joseph. So I made a note. I said, in case we see this later, I'm debating on trading knights. But that helps you fix your pawns. So notice that he currently has doubled pawns here. When Jordan made this move to get his knight out, it's fine. It's a little bit far on the edge of the board. It's not completely cut off on the edge of the board. Notice it still has these kind of squares available to it. You're only cutting off 2 squares, not 4 squares, so it's not the end of the world. This is a perfectly valid point for this knight to be. I am debating on trading off this pair of knights, and what this does is, what this does is allows black to get their pawn structure fixed. So, say one move, right, could have, or even here, could have the pawns back in this kind of order. In this kind of order. If I can get my clicking to work, click, click, click. Okay. So I could help my opponent get their pawns back lined up into a chain, probably even prop this up to have a nice pawn chain back and all connected. Whereas right now he's got an isolated A pawn, he's got doubled C pawns. It isn't that big of a deal, but it is a little bit of a deal. All right, this pawn can't move no matter what. No matter what's attacking this pawn can't move until this guy gets out of the way. Well, this guy can only move 1 square at a time, so this guy's stuck. So you do get this doubled pawn, and a doubled pawn is a less strong, a weaker pawn, less effective. So I'm debating on making this trade, or possibly just letting it sit there, knowing that it keeps these pawns doubled. I decided to go ahead and make the trade. Again, in my mind, I'm thinking I'll make the trade, get rid of his knight. I don't have to worry about his knight anymore. He has a pair of bishops, and I have a knight bishop. So it's not the end of the world, but it is, to me, in my mind, a decent combination. Yeah, the engine puts us back square, back at even. It's trying to find different lines. You can see it's chugging away. But yeah, it puts us at pretty much even, no matter how deep it goes. Yeah. So we're even at this point. I have some pieces that are a little too far forward, so I have probably overcommitted these guys. Notice they don't have a lot of support right now. The only thing that's really supporting these guys is they're supporting each other, and I'm using a rook to support. And now we start to see the power of long-range bishops, a pair of long-range bishops, and how much work they can do, as opposed to one that's stuck here basically being a pawn, right? This bishop, the only real work this bishop is doing, could be done by a pawn keeping this guy in place. In fact, it could be done by this pawn if earlier in the game I just made that full push up. So I have weakened my dark square bishop by forcing it to do the job that a pawn could do. I made a waiting move. I honestly, at this point in time, I did not know what to do. I probably should have looked at getting this knight back home somehow. All I had left to really develop was this queen somewhere. I did not want to put my queen here because I didn't want this to happen and to end up the spy that I was trying to do, to reverse it and put myself in that. So I'd like to get it up here, but that could run into issues like this. So I didn't know where to put my queen. I probably should have started bringing these guys back home just to turtle up a little bit more and figure out. So I make a waiting move. I make a waiting move. It takes care of my back rank. It's not a strong move. It's a slow move. It doesn't really do anything. Jordan attacks my knight again. Of course he would. Why not? He had that sitting there. Why not? So I have to get my knight home. Is it too late to get my knight home? I don't know. Notice I now have an undefended pawn. This is basically setting up to make sure that I don't start driving things here like this. Notice there is the possibility of me going here, and then here. Jordan handles it, takes care of his back rank issues, and gives himself an escape square should he need it. Like I said, I don't know really what to do at this point, but I do have that diagonal a little bit more protected? Should I do anything stupid? So now we start to get to where, in my opinion, I could have played this better, and Jordan played it perfectly. He makes an attack across to my knight. Notice the only thing defending, my knight is defended, but the only thing defending it is this pawn here. And I'm not ready to give up this pawn. I mean, this structure. I really would like to keep it just a little bit longer for training purposes, for me, for just an exercise in not pushing pawns that I don't have to. I have 2 pieces that could get into the game and defend this knight so that if Jordan takes, I can take back without ruining my structure. And that's the game plan I go for. Jordan makes a move. It gets his queen out. It's a bit of a waiting move, a bit of a slow move, but notice he has now fixed his pawn structure exactly like we talked about earlier. He's got a very solid pawn chain right in the middle of the board, or on the queen side of the board, and my 4 pawns to his 3 with a doubled is no longer as strong. And here's where I make the first of the boo-boos. So my goal here was, I saw this, he's fixed his pawn structure. I saw that I could get in here and start a pawn storm on the queen side. I have turtled up a little bit here on the king side, but I've got a really weird structure. Notice this bishop is still undefended. By putting my rook in between my queen, the only thing that was defending that, I cut it off. So this goes back to a principle that I've talked about before. I'd like to make a video on, or a training exercise for myself, is overprotecting, right? Don't just protect things once, protect them twice, protect them 3 times. If there's nothing better to do, which there's been a couple of times in this game where I have said, really, I don't know what to do, there's better things to do. If there's nothing to do, find a piece and defend it. And in this case, I drop a whole rook. Notice I don't have anything along the back row anymore. I have gotten rid of my 2 rooks that are defending each other. I have eliminated that strength. And I don't even have anything to take back. So Jordan is literally up 5 whole points of material, an entire rook. Notice this bishop is not even trapped, right? It can go, it can get out, not there. It can get out. Yeah, it can go all the way back to one of his home squares. So I'm not even trapping this bishop. So I thought, well, maybe I can cut him off. Maybe I can try to trap him. Notice if I get if he goes here, I can now cover it that way. My bishop is still undefended, which Jordan immediately attacks. So now I've got to figure out a way to defend this bishop or drop this bishop back. I'm also looking at this is now a threat, right? Because he can take with attack on my my queen. So I'm trying to. I've now made a mistake and I'm flustered and I'm trying to cover too many things. Where way back earlier when I had all my pieces stuck way out here, I should have brought them home to defend them. I try to defend along this, and I drop another whole piece. So I am down a rook and a piece. I'm down essentially 8 points of material, and I have 0 in compensation. I don't even have any kind of tricksy checks to try to steal back this queen, because Jordan has done a perfect job of keeping his rooks defending each other. So all of Jordan's pieces are now working together. His queen is a little exposed, but it was exposed specifically to pick up some material, and it's got, it's got lots of squares that it can get home to if it needs to. Yeah, there's even some, no, there's not really any threats. But he's got room to get home. So my thought process was, well, if I could go here, maybe I could figure out a way to trap this queen, right? I've got it defended, I've got this defended, but he's got that square covered. Well, okay, what if I go back? Nope, he's got that covered. All right, what if I come all the way back here to maybe try to threaten something here, along this side? I decided to go with this line. Basically, try to get my rook back home if this happens, the take, I can get my rook back into the game somehow. He makes a queen trade. When you're up in material, trading is a benefit for the person who's up in material. Jordan just continues the pressure. I am trying something here. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm in a desperate act, and I'm basically trying to see if I can somehow end up with a passed pawn on this rank. If Jordan pushes down, I can take. He takes. I take back. I've ended up with a pawn on this row. It's not 100% passed because there's still a defender here to worry about, but my only hope of getting back into this game is to figure out a way to get some material back. Perfect move here. I no longer can continue with my plan because Jordan is now attacking one of my pawns. I have to be real careful not to give up more material here. He's got now a pair of rooks that are slicing down, so I am just in trouble. I'm going to hide. I'm going to try to hide my king. Notice my king is being cut off here, so I can't even push up this fortress. I can't even get into this fortress unless I go here and here. So I try to start hiding my king. Jordan makes the appropriate move. Does not allow me to get a passed pawn because notice now the exchanges are taking place here. And if he tries to take here, notice he's got it defended. So I have to take. He takes back. I notice I can't take here. I've now the only thing keeping an eye on this pawn is this rook. Oops, excuse me. Notice my rook is now under attack, so I have to get my rook out of there. So I completely boggle this game. I completely throw the game. At this point, when I make this move, at this point I know I'm resigning the game. So at this point, I've already given up. Jordan makes one more move to demonstrate that he is 100% winning this game. Because notice, I cannot save both pieces anymore. If I try to, come on, game, work with me. If I try to defend, right, because this is an undefended pawn, if I try to defend here, then he just takes a whole piece. If I try to move this piece up here to try to defend that pawn, he's got it covered. So there's nothing, and there's no other squares I can get to. So there's nothing I can do to save both of these. So I can save one or the other, and at this point in time, it really doesn't matter, does it? So I'm losing more material. I'm probably losing material with check, which means my really only escape is probably to start blocking. But notice I can't even do that, because if he takes here, I'd have to go down here like this. It gets ugly real fast, guys, real fast at that moment in time. Because I go down here, he comes here. Yeah, he could even give back material, right? He's up so much material at this point in time, he could give some back and still win the game. So there's nothing more I can do at this point. Jordan's just got too many threats on the board. He's spying down. Even though this bishop is technically out of the game, right? Like it never got back into the game, so it would have been the same as if I'd captured it. Because it's a threat that I have to try to keep from getting back into the game, and I keep an eye on it, it causes too much agita and stress for me. So there's really no way I'm getting back in this game, and so I throw it in. So Jordan wins a very good game. He followed all the principles. This was a perfect Ruy Lopez game, a perfect training exercise. I am going to go back into my notes and try to figure out the Berlin. Let's turn the engine on, actually. Let's just turn the engine on and see. So from here, the engine says the best move, yes, is to go ahead and capture. Jordan, I don't know what other moves you were considering, but the engine says these are the next 3 best moves. But yeah, he takes, yeah, that rook. So here's another line that the Ruy Lopez says. I can go ahead and just move this pawn up here. Now, it is defended. I notice it would even be defended by the queen. So my opponent really can't take without giving it up still. So the threat here is, I guess this. But this is a line that that showed, yeah, d4, where you just come straight up and you counterattack this pawn. And I guess the idea is that parking it there if they capture, I capture, you capture, I capture back. I don't know. And then slide over? I don't know. I'm not seeing it yet. But notice that if this pawn is here, when this knight goes here, it's already defended. So that's something to consider. Or I guess maybe it's expecting this trade to happen. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not certain. Those two words combined. But I went ahead with this line here, which the engine says is a very popular, also the top move. Jordan, again, the top move. Yeah. The top move that minimizes white's advantage is this. The top move that maximizes white advantage is that. Okay, so here is where it's a little bit iffy. So I probably did not have to make that exchange right there. That's probably what it's saying, yeah. It's saying I don't need to make this exchange. Oops, sorry guys. It's saying I don't need to make this exchange right now. I should go ahead and just take first. Because even if he takes back, I'm taking with check. Yeah, and better off it says don't even bother taking back. Captures, move. I guess either way works, right? Because it sure as heck is not going to go captures, because then captures. Not going to go that way, so. Yeah, the two most popular ones are either to move the bishop back, wow, all the way to f1. Okay, so I have seen this setup before, but I didn't understand it. Notice the bishop is back home, right? But the big difference is the bishop is home, but the king is castled. So this bishop helps this structure here. So we've now made a castle of our own using this bishop and this as defensive measures. Notice we can always do the fianchetto if we need to. I would not have spotted this on my own. This is not a move that I would make without doing some training and some learning. Notice this is still covered, so we can still make that. Moving the bishop all the way back home. Okay. Interesting. So I'm going to keep that in mind. So next time I see the Berlin game, so this is notes to myself. Next time we see the Berlin game, yes, go ahead and castle. If my opponent captures that pawn, that's fine. You can stick with your plan of doing the rook e1. That's still fine. But don't make this exchange. Hold off on that. Bring the bishop home. Take your pawn back, right? Yeah, take your pawn back. Let them decide what comes next. And then you get your... Well, I guess I have to capture first. That comes with check, so that's okay. So he has to block, and then I can get my bishop all the way home. Okay. So I will look for this next time I play a Berlin game. A Ruy Lopez Berlin defense. I will keep in mind that this bishop's job is to come home with his king. All right. Well, that's something that that was a fun game. I got my butt kicked, but that's all right. It happens sometimes. And I will catch you guys later.